The other weekend some friends and I had a chance to experience PCP. All of us were kind of nervous about using the drug because of all the misconceptions associated with it. We all were anxious as well though, so we dipped 2 cigarettes and lit them up and started passing them around at about 2 a.m., pretty much immediately after I returned from work. I inhaled the first drag and the horrible taste of the smoke almost choked me. Being an avid cannabis smoker, this smoke seemed cold and sterile compared to the warm thick smoke I was used to having fill my lungs. I continued smoking from the cigarettes with my friends until the end, but I can't help but feel I was wasting them. I was having trouble dealing with the taste of the smoke and was barely holding my hits in. We sat around in my friend's car parked out in front of my house for nearly a half hour listening to music, and fooling around. I felt very stoned and tired from the sticks. I also felt slightly disconnected from what was going on around me, but I felt very disappointed. I figured for such a potent drug this PCP had hardly done anything for me. We all decided to return upstairs to the apartment. By this point my friends all seemed like the drug was hitting them full force. The 3 of us sat around in my bedroom for nearly an hour. My friend sat mostly in silence when not talking incoherently. The drug was hitting them full on. I just sat and tried to observe, wondering if this was all the drug would do to me. By this time I felt like I could barely stand up at all, but still no hallucinations, no mind-numbing effects. So I decided to smoke some weed. I felt like I was probably at the peak of the experience. But I was still disappointed. After a while I decided to smoke another Viki stick. I had my friend who was experienced with the drug dip me another stick. He watched me smoke it and made me hold my hits in so I wouldn't be so disappointed. About halfway through the stick I started feeling a numbness starting in my lungs and expanding outwards through the rest of my body. I was smoking the whole cigarette by myself until it was about 3/4 through, and then I could barely finish. I felt completely off balance, I could not stand up. I had visual hallucinations similar to acid trips. Morphs in people's faces, etc. I decided I should stand and go get my weed. When I stood I felt like I was racing through thousands of bright shimmering stars. I looked at my friend, he smiled and his face started moving around. He asked me if I was stuck. I remember looking at him with a puzzled look saying I don't know what stuck is. The hallucinations were more shimmering and shiny now, more so than any acid trip, but the colors seemed to stay the same at this point. I looked around the room, which caused me to notice one of my friends smoking a stick, so I asked him to pass it and took another couple of hits. Again I felt the numbness in my chest, this time it seemed to stick with me. I began to feel as if I knew everything that was going on, but like none of it mattered. When I tried to speak I felt almost as if the words weren't there, and when I finally could muster up the words to speak it came out in a strange monotone voice. I grabbed a plate with some weed on it. Unfortunately it still needed to be broken up. It was probably only 15 minutes after I smoked that full stick, but it felt like I had been in this state for hours and almost as if I was growing into the trip already. I finally began smoking the cannabis. I remember the taste of it being so good, but I felt as if I were barely getting any smoke out of my bong. I finished the bong by myself on the floor of my kitchen. After endless minutes of just sitting there I decided to stand. I began looking at my friends. Most of them were not in the mindset I was. I tried to evaluate the situation but felt like I didn't care enough to think about anything that was going on around me. I decided now would be a perfect time for inner exploration. I needed to get out of the small crowd gathered at my house. I decided to go to my room. I could feel a peak rising in me. It was like there was a gap between my conscious state, and every time I'd slip into the gap it grew bigger and bigger. When I got to my room it was silent, but when I looked around I saw one of my stuck friends. I was delighted. I couldn't wait to ask if he was experiencing what I was. When I tried to hold a conversation with him, however, he did not respond at all. I knew I needed to lie down so I could get into a trance. I turned on some music and laid silent for what seemed like hours, deeply immersed in thought. There was no need for hallucinations because I was in a total dreamlike state. I felt so comforted lying there. I could now totally feel the drug. I wasn't just tired and numb now, I was filled with a different kind of sensation I can't even describe. I was still lying on the ground, but I was no longer tired. My heart was racing and I was awake, but I couldn't move. I finally got up and I saw my CD was only on song 4. I was amazed. I felt like I was laying there for hours. My friend was still zoned out next to me, so I decided to leave him in peace. After leaving the room I felt like a changed person. I went back out to where everybody was. My other friend who was on this trip with me came up to me and we decided to go for a walk. We stood around my apartment for an hour trying to decide who was going to join us for a walk. It turned out nobody except me and my friend had been interested in joining us. I am amazed at how we would need so much time to prepare for such a simple task, but that's the way this drug works. On the walk I noticed that every color was different than usual. They were kind of pastel looking, not the bright color imagery I am used to seeing from psychedelics. Instead, these colors seemed like very bright colors trapped under gray. It was a nice afterglow to accompany the drastic changes I felt I had been through. Along the walk we had seen a mother walking her young daughter who seemed terrified of us, and with good reason. The PCP had left us looking quite disturbed and also quite flushed. We laughed off how we must look to all the people driving down the road going to work. We walked and discussed what we felt. We both noticed that we felt, for lack of better words, incredibly stupid. We both had trouble communicating ideas and what we could say came out all jumbled up. We both decided that even though the drug was awe-inspiring, it was almost too powerful for human brains and we didn't like the way it left us. Although now that some of the stupidity has worn off from this drug, I may want to explore it further. After a long walk filled with beautiful colors across the landscape, my body felt physically exhausted. I knew my body needed rest, so as we walked in my apartment, it was only 6 a.m. upon return. I wished my friends a good night and collapsed on my bed and drifted into a most peaceful sleep.